Hello and welcome back to Exodus 17's Outreach Masterclass. Today we're going to tackle the thing that makes people the most nervous about outreach head on. The reason that a lot of people avoid talking about their faith is because they can't figure out how to naturally and positively have a spiritual conversation. It's the oldest question in the book. How do I turn a regular conversation into a spiritual conversation without making things weird? Today we're going to come to grips with the most powerful tool in your toolbox. How your personal experience with God is the key to having natural and positive spiritual conversations. It needs to be said right away that we put way too much pressure on ourselves to say the right thing at the right time to the right people. We fear that if we get it wrong, they'll be turned off to God and their fate will be sealed, to burn in hell for all eternity. We give ourselves way too much credit. The work of recreating a soul and giving them new life is God's alone. In John 6:37, Jesus said, "All those the Father gives me will come to me." That's a relief, isn't it? I mean, that means that we can't screw up a person's eternal destiny. That is a load off. It's God who starts the work of saving a person, and He who started a good work in them will bring it to completion. One of the most helpful tools in your tool belt is your own faith story, specifically about how God met and saved you. To remember that the upturn of our story began with God as the prime mover is a good and productive thing to remember, to write down, and to rehearse. The story of the Bible begins the same way. In the beginning, God. Before that, everything was formless and empty and dark. I think that you could say the same thing about your story before everything changed with, "In the beginning, God." John Stott, in his book Basic Christianity, said, "The first 4 words of the Bible are more than an introduction to the creation story or to the book of Genesis. They supply the key which opens our understanding to the Bible as a whole. They tell us that the religion of the Bible is a religion of the initiative of God. You can never take God by surprise. You can never anticipate Him. He always makes the first move. He's always there in the beginning. Before people existed, God acted. Before people stirred themselves to seek God, God sought people. In the Bible, we don't see people groping after God. We see God reaching after people." So let's talk about your experience. Let's talk about how God took the initiative in your life and changed everything. The old school name for it is your testimony, but I'll be calling it your faith story. 1 Peter 3:15 says, "Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have." What kind of person would you rather give an opportunity to? If you need a ride in someone's car, will you give the opportunity to Uber or Lyft to some guy who needs to pick up the fast food wrappers, spray some Febreze, and download maps on their phone? In the same way, one of the ways that we can be more useful to God is to prepare. Some things that help with being prepared to share why we have hope are remembering, writing, and rehearsing. If we do that well, we should be able to share our faith story without even thinking about it. Let's remember your faith story right now, and you can write it later in your notes. Part 1 of your faith story is about your life before Jesus. What caused you to see that you needed Jesus? This is where you remember the things that were formless, empty, and dark. You'll remember the brokenness of the world, what others did and what you did that was broken and sinful. Thomas Watson said, "Till sin be bitter, Christ will not be sweet." So remember that bitterness. Make it broad enough that it's relatable to those that you tell your story to. Part 2 of your faith story is about your decision. The who, what, when, where, why, and how of your decision to surrender to Jesus. Remember some details about the setting, the characters, the circumstances that set the stage for your decision, and then be clear about what you decided. You may have thought one thing at the time, like, "I need to go to church." But looking back at that decision, what decision did you actually make? Make sure that you're clear about your decision to surrender to Jesus as Savior and King. That's what a faith story is all about, not becoming a moral person or a churchgoer. What decision did you make about Jesus, whether or not you fully understood it at that time? Part 3 of your faith story is about what happened in your life after you surrendered to Jesus as Savior and King. Now, having a relationship with Jesus, what changes have taken place in your life? Where internally and externally things were once formless, empty, and dark, how has your life taken shape, been fulfilling, and brightened by Jesus' presence and leadership in it? What's the positive opposite of the negative that you experienced before Jesus. State it in a way that the people that you're going to be sharing it with can see that it's something that they want to. Remember, write and rehearse. Later, interact with your notes and write it all down. Write down every thought, every angle, everything that comes to your mind, and then refine it and rewrite it. Remember that you're preparing to share the reason for the hope that's within you to people naturally. So you'll need to shorten it to about 3 minutes and also to about 15 seconds. Because you rarely get the chance to monologue with someone for more than 3 minutes, and you often only have a chance to mention it in passing. So write down a 3-minute and a 15-second succinct version to be well prepared. Remember, write, and rehearse. How often should we rehearse it? I won't give you an exact number, but the principle that the more we rehearse, the more ready we are to share it, the better we'll be at sharing it, and the more opportunities God will give us to share it. Make a decision right now, though, who you're going to practice it with and how often. Calendarize your priorities, or they get crowded out by a busy life. Your faith story is one of the most powerful tools in your tool belt because it's your own personal experience, so it's irrefutable. But your faith story is only one part of your personal experience with God. Think about all of the ways that God has continued shaping your life after that event in the past. And this is the key to making our spiritual conversations natural and positive experiences for everyone involved. Because we still experience brokenness in our lives. And we still experience God showing up in the mess and bringing order and beauty out of the chaos. In that way, we can relate to the brokenness that others are experiencing. And we can share with them why we have hope where they don't. Because we know that God can show up and change everything. We've seen it. We are seeing it in a variety of ways if we're watching for it. This is a totally different approach from the cringy way that we may think of starting a spiritual conversation. Maybe you've heard some kind of religious pitch like I was taught when I was young about how to transition into a spiritual conversation. The worst story I ever heard was where a guy went to get a new pair of shoes, and he transitioned into a spiritual conversation by asking the kid, "Tell me about the sole of the shoe. Would you say this shoe has a good sole or a bad sole?" The kid said, "I don't know, it's good, I guess." "What would you say about your soul? Because Romans 3:10 says, 'There is none righteous, no, not one.'" That's exactly the opposite of what we're trying to achieve. That is not natural and positive at all. Let me break down why that feels so gross. The worst part of that isn't that it's totally cheesy, which it is. And the worst part isn't that it's a little manipulative, which it is. The worst part is that it's impersonal. And what normally motivates that kind of behavior is that the evangelist cares more about the product than the person. They care about dispensing the gospel message X number of times or winning X number of converts to the Lord or pleasing whoever's guilting or shaming them into doing it. But there is a better way. To make a spiritual conversation natural and positive, a few things need to be happening in our everyday walk with God, outside of the event of sharing our faith. Number one, we need to see and acknowledge God's activity in our lives, enough that we can easily see how He relates to an everyday life. And that's how we grow adept at relating our faith to people's lives, is by reflection over all of the things that God has done and is doing for you. You may not relate to your friend who's going through a divorce, but you can relate to relational discord and see how God is helping you through it. You may not relate to your coworker who comes to work hungover, but there are things you struggle to let go of, or there are times you don't give your best and God is helping you through it. See and acknowledge God's activity in your life, and you'll have broad ways that we can relate. Number two, we need to talk about God as a matter of course with those we do life with, so that it's natural for us to do so. People can tell if you normally talk about God or not, like they can tell when someone isn't really into sports but memorizes the highlights and results of a sports game just so that they can talk about it at the water cooler. They may say, "You didn't actually watch the game, did you?" People can also sniff out the fact that we either don't experience or don't acknowledge God's presence and activity in our everyday life too. And number three, we need to be in the habit, like Jesus was, of being a friend of sinners, not just missionaries to them. It's natural and positive to be friendly, and friendship leads to meaningful conversations and helping each other in our places of need. Okay, these are all great principles, but let's talk brass tacks. What does it look like? How can I go from everyday conversation into a spiritual one naturally and positively? Let me show you how with this tool called the door to their heart. Imagine that there's a door into people's hearts that's closed to people and it's locked from the inside. People only open that door to their heart to people that they trust. So take the time, make the effort, talk to them through the keyhole for a while and earn their trust. And they will unlock eventually. The handle on the door to their heart is labeled pain. Look for pain in the conversation, and when you see it, grab it. They may say something like, "My mom is really sick. My kids won't listen. My teacher or boss is such a jerk." And them sharing that pain and opening up to you, that is their way of saying, "You can come in, you're invited." The handle on the door to their heart is labeled pain. Watch for it. That's your opening. And here's how you step in. STEP. S is for stop. Stop everything that you're doing because God just changed your plans. Choose to stop and make space for what's happening. Take time to listen well. Don't be distracted. Just give them the space to share their pain with you. T is for think. As they're sharing, think about ways that God has helped you in situations similar to theirs. Again, it may not be specifically what they're going through, but God has been or is probably active in your life in something broadly similar. E is for empathize. When you do get a chance to talk, share how you've been in their shoes. Without trying to fix them, share how you can sort of relate and how God helped or is helping you. Just give him the credit for what he's done in your life. If they show interest, invite them to receive his help for themselves. P is for pray. Offer to pray for them. See if they'd be open to you praying for them right then and there, or just later on your own. See if they want prayer for help with a situation, or for starting a relationship with God who can help them. And boom, you're in. And that wasn't so weird. Basically, all that happened was that they opened up, and so did you, and you expressed a desire to help in the way that you know how. That's how to get people to hear your story. Just show genuine interest in hearing their story. And guess what they'll eventually do? They'll ask you about yours. Spiritual conversations don't have to be scary or awkward. They can be natural and positive, especially if you talk about your own personal experience. The most powerful tools in your outreach tool belt are your own faith story, and you're entering the door to people's hearts by relating with them through your own ongoing walk with God as he shows up in the mess and brings order and beauty out of the chaos. You'll be less nervous and awkward about these spiritual conversations as you prepare, like we've been told to do. In fact, you'll start to look for and look forward to these spiritual conversations, because about a third of all adults in America claim they have personally made a big change in their life because of a conversation about faith. A full 35%. So go ahead and get off the bench and do your best. God has got them and got you right where he wants you. You're going to do great, and over time you'll do greater and greater things. Thanks. We'll see you next time.